Hello everyone, in today's video I will be narrating stories that I found off of Reddit. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But without further ado,
let's get straight into these stories.
when I was little, I lived in an apartment complex that consisted of two buildings with a slight gap in between them. It was only about 50 feet, so I'd often walk by myself to go visit my mom's best friend in the other building. The apartments were surrounded by thick woods that had blackberry brambles so thick you couldn't stick your hand in without getting torn up by thorns. One afternoon, I went to my mother's best friend's apartment to deliver Girl Scout cookies and stayed later than I meant to because I was fascinated by her aquariums. It had started to get dark by the time I was leaving, but I wasn't scared because the buildings were so close. I had taken about 10 steps when my inner voice started screaming. I'm older now, so I recognized what it was, but at the time it was like being overwhelmed with a feeling in my gut. I looked into the woods across the parking lot and saw the intense red glow from someone taking a drag on a cigarette. I turned back towards my apartment, trying to pretend I hadn't seen anything, but then I heard the sound of something large moving in the woods. I turned my head for just a moment and there was a gaunt, scary-looking man starting to run at me. I took off, screaming bloody murder, knowing I was less than 50 feet away from the safety of my apartment. I could hear his feet slopping the pavement behind me and he was gaining on me. I was nearly on my porch steps when my uncle, who lived next door, opened his door to see why I was screaming bloody murder. I collapsed into his arms screaming about the man chasing me from the woods, but by the time Mike opened his door, the man was gone. At first they didn't believe me because there had been nobody there, but I was so hysterical they decided to check it out. They noticed an area that had been disturbed in the blackberry brambles, but they were so thick, Mike had to use his machete to cut through them. About 2 feet into the area of the disturbance, there was a small clearing with a pile of cigarette butts where the man had been standing, watching and waiting for me. The man chasing me had disappeared, so they think he ran between the buildings when I started to get close to my apartment door. So about a week after this incident, my mother's boyfriend and I were riding dirt bikes through the woods by our apartment. There was a retainer pond that we liked to fish at, so we were headed out that day to see if we could catch anything. We discovered a campsite on the trail that hadn't been there a few weeks prior, and Russ decided to check it out. It was just a tent, cooler, a fire pit, and trash strewn everywhere. The trash part really bugged Russ because we believe in the leave it better than you found it principle, and I could tell he was pissed. As we approached the tent, he announced himself to see if anyone was there, and when they didn't respond, he pulled back the zipper of the tent. After looking inside for a moment, he ordered me to back up, but the damage had already been done since I had gotten a clear look at what was in the tent. Attached to the walls and littering the floor was some of the most brutal and sadistic adult magazine content anyone could imagine. And the worst part of it was the graffiti that had been added after the fact. Most of the models had their eyes scratched out, lines across their throat like they'd been cut, and there was blood drawn dripping out of their orifices. It's been over 30 years since this happened, and the image is still splashed right upon my memory. There was a torn sleeping pad, and the pad looked like it had a substantial stain that could have been blood. Russ stood there in silence for a minute, then told me to get on my bike because we were going home. When we got home, he called the sheriff, then led them out to the torture tent in the woods. They destroyed the campsite, and it was never spoken of again. I never put two and two together as a child, but as I got older, when I thought about it, I realized how unbelievably lucky I am. So this happened about 7 months ago. I was visiting San Diego for job interviews and staying at my favorite hotel in Sorrento Mesa. For a background, I'm a 40-year-old man and a pretty big guy. I'm 6'1" and a former club bouncer. Now, onto the weirdness. On my third night, I was up pretty late after hanging out with some old friends after my interviews. I got back to the hotel around 2 in the morning with some Sonny's donuts. After eating a few, drinking a few more, and watching South Park, I decided to have a smoke before going to bed. This made it now around 3 in the morning, so I go downstairs, walk out front to the smoking area by the fountain, but there's another couple who are also staying at the hotel already there. I didn't want to impose, so I decided to just walk around the outside parts of the hotel while I smoked. I walked around the pool, the barbecue area, the basketball courts, then started back for the side door. As I did, a black sedan drove up alongside me and stopped. The window rolled down, and a tiny Asian woman asked if I knew how to get out of the parking lot and back to the street. Now, from where we were when she asked me, this was literally in a straight line about 150 feet in front of her, so I thought she was drunk or just blind. So I just politely said yes, just keep going straight, and turned left at the tree. She then asked me if I could get in the car and show her. Now, again, I'm a former club bouncer. There was absolutely no intimidation factor, but for some reason, I instantly felt uneasy. Again, it was literally right in front of her. She could see the road. Also, the windows were all tinted far more than they should have been, and I honestly couldn't tell if anyone else was in the car. I used the smoking as an excuse to not get in the car, but she said she didn't mind and gave me a very creepy smile. I politely declined and again pointed out that the road was literally right there, so I'd just be walking back in 5 seconds anyway. She again asked if I would get in and show her. This was feeling like a weird kid / ice cream truck situation. I mean guys, how often do decently good looking women just drive up and ask you to get in their car at 3 in the morning in a hotel parking lot? Nothing about it was right. Again, I politely declined as I finished my smoke and was luckily already standing right at the hotel side door when all this started, so I just went in. The woman just drove off as she rolled up the window right exactly to the exit she just asked me to show her to. So I told the front desk about it and they said they'd keep an eye out, but I'm quite sure nothing was ever done or came of it. Just one of those things that really makes me wonder, why did she want me in the car so badly for? It had to be some kind of scam. I just wonder exactly how much danger I was in. I live in Sacramento, California, where every summer we have the state fair. I was in my late teens and my friend and I decided to check out the fair together. Parking was $10 and we were cheap and decided to park across the street. Well, a few streets deep in from across the street because a lot of people had the same idea. The fair was typical fair stuff and we had fun. It was almost 10 in the afternoon and we decided to get out of there. The fair was lit up with lights and chaos, but the further we got away from it and the deeper we got into the back streets across the street from the fair, the darker it got and the less people you saw. My friend faced me and said maybe I should get my mace out just in case, and we both laughed because both of our families at different points had given us mace to stay safe, but because we were young and dumb we thought we were invincible. My friend drove, so she was digging in her purse looking for her keys and slowed down while doing so, and I was a few feet ahead of her. At that moment the fair fireworks started popping off in the sky and I turned around to look. For several seconds it was walking backward while doing so. I turned around and at the moment as I was passing a creepy gray van, a man popped out behind it and grabbed me forcefully with both arms around me and started picking me up. Immediately my friend ran up and sprayed mace in his face, and she was able to do so because the mace happened to be attached to her keychain which she just got out of her purse. She accidentally got some mace in my eyes and it hurt, but even though my eyes were burning, I vividly remember opening them up enough to see that there was this cloud of mace floating in front of the guy's eyes as they were wide open as if the mace did not affect him at all. Then he said calmly in a creepy voice, "I was just looking at her." We both screamed bloody murder and he let me go and we ran all the way to her car and got the heck out of Dodge. The weird thing is we didn't even go straight to the police that night because I wasn't sure if that was enough of an offense to do so, which I am in my 40s now and know that it is. I should have gone straight to the police then. I tried calling the non-emergency line the next day to report it as I was suffering from red and swollen eyes from the mace and I was being placed on hold and not being taken seriously, so I eventually let it go and moved on with my life. A week later I heard in the news that there was a man wanted by police that lingered around the American River trails who was abducting women and taking them into his van and assaulting them. I always wondered what would have happened if my friend wasn't there. Would I even be here? I have never been so thankful to be maced in the face. Ladies ... even men carry mace or some type of self-defense tool. It's an unpredictable, scary place out there sometimes. This happened almost 10 years ago when I was about 18. I wanted to go pick up some groceries at our local Walmart. It was around 11 in the afternoon at night and I just got off work. I usually have no problem going anywhere by myself, but on this specific night my inner self was telling me to invite my friend to tag along. I am roughly 5 feet tall, female, and 105 pounds, but I don't get spooked too easily and always carry pepper spray with me. Anyways, I call my friend to ask if she'll accompany me and I go and pick her up. We walk into the produce side of Walmart and almost right away I noticed this man staring at us very intently. He was around 5'5", kind of heavy, had a Hawaiian shirt on, and looked of Hawaiian decent. So we're over by the fresh produce and I am keeping my eye on him as he pretends to be looking at bread but clearly keeps putting things back. I turn my back for a second to grab something, then I hear a male's voice ask, "Hey, do you guys know of anywhere I can get food this late?" For more background information, I lived in a city of about 50,000 people. Right across from this Walmart was an Applebee's, a McDonald's a quarter mile up the road, and other various places to get food. Plus, we were in the middle of a Walmart, so I don't beat around the bush and flatly tell him about a couple restaurants around where we were. He then asks, "Well, what's fun to do around here?" It's late at night, so nothing really to do except maybe go to Applebee's or a local bar. I tell him Applebee's is open and we have bars downtown, but that's all I am aware of. He proceeds to ask what we're doing when we leave and I tell him we have to leave now. He apologizes and says he didn't mean to be creepy, so we walk away and are looking for the frozen aisle when I spot him on the opposite side walking by. I tell my friend I had a bad feeling about him since we walked in and wanted to test out if he was following us. We walk a few more aisles and sure enough he is on the other end nonchalantly walking by pretending not to see us. I backtrack a couple of aisles to get something and he walks up pretending to look at things. I finally ask if I can help him with something. I think I threw him off guard by being so direct because he stutters and asks what aisle the milk or something is in. I tell him and we leave to check out. Well, wouldn't you know, he's in the checkout right next to us with a pack of gum, no milk or whatever else he was looking at. He finishes first and watches us as he leaves the store. Me thinking he's gone by now tells my friend let's just run to the car. So we run out to the car, looking around to make sure we don't see him. Now here's the super creepy part. As I am leaving the parking lot, we spot him sitting on the trunk of his car watching people leave Walmart. I drive by to get his license plate number. He sees us and rushes into his car. I speed off as quickly as possible so he doesn't see where I went. I then call the cops and tell them what happened and relayed the license plate to them. So creepy Hawaiian shirt guy who was supposedly looking for a place to eat while in the middle of Walmart. Please let's never meet again. This happened about a month ago. For a bit of background, me, my cousin, and my brother took classes over the summer at a local college. Me and my cousin took a biology class, while my brother took a precalculus class. My brother's class ends later than our class, giving us a 2-hour window where we'd sit around the college to wait for him. During the encounter, we were waiting for him at the cafeteria, passing the time. After a while, this woman in a wheelchair shows up in front of some vending machines a couple feet in front of us. I paid it no mind, but she sat in front of that vending machine for 10 minutes 15 minutes and started to play loud music. It startled me and so I looked up at her. She then looked at us and asked, "Do any of you boys have 10 cents I could use for the vending machine?" I had 2 $5 bills in my pocket in case I needed some food, so I gave her a 5 and I got handed back my change. Then she asked for another favor. This time it was to bring her to a parking lot near the football stadium where her ride would be waiting. She said she had never been there and needed some guidance. I figured there was no harm in helping her so I took the handles, but she immediately stopped me and asked for my cousin instead. I was being pretty oblivious during this entire encounter so I didn't even realize how strange that request was and didn't notice many of the strange things she did until later. And I also want to clarify that she was able to move on her own just fine, so the request for a push at all was strange too. And as my cousin was pushing her, she kept looking back at me and giving an uncanny smile, like it was meant to be a friendly smile, but it came off more like she had some sort of malicious intent. After we arrived, she looks at us and asks, "Could you two stay with me until my ride comes?" Still giving us the smile, but we reluctantly agreed. You know, once I had to go back and forth from here and the other parking lot. It was so annoying, she recalls as we wait. Me and my cousin shuffled at this because we found this extremely unsettling. This was because it meant she lied to us about not knowing where she was going. Even stranger, she tells me about how she loves to smash glass bottles to tame her anger ... like the glass bottles she had in her hands at that moment. I hadn't caught onto the strangeness yet, but my cousin was unnerved. He was trying to discreetly point out that no cameras were around me and that not many people were around, but I didn't catch any of it. At some points while we were waiting, this one car would keep circling the parking lot too. We asked if it was her ride, but she told us that her ride was a van. At that time, our ride came, so we apologized and left. We've told many other people about this story and they all agreed that she was acting pretty strange. Later I realized how it seemed like she was trying hard to be friendly, how anxious she seemed, and how many of the things she said didn't match up and seemed off. The main thing that fueled me seeing this as odd was the fact that according to my cousin and his sibling, there was an email sent out warning people about a potential human trafficking scheme caught on campus. I couldn't confirm the validity of it because me and my brother aren't actually enrolled into the school and therefore don't get messages about anything going on around campus, but nevertheless, it's caused me to relook what happened through that lens. Shortly after I turned 18, back in the early 2000s, I got a job at the local movie rental place to help pay for my college. I worked there for about 2 years and during that time had been promoted to hold keys to the store and open and close the registers. This also meant that I was occasionally working by myself for short periods of time. One such morning, I was going through the morning procedures and putting returned movies back on the shelves. I was accustomed to greeting every customer no matter what, not only as a friendly gesture but as a part of the loss prevention protocol. Anyway, this particular morning I was taking the movie cart around and reshelving the movies and I heard the door ding on the other side of the store, so I greet whoever it is with my voice raised high. "How are you today?" Normally, they would give a reply back, but I didn't get one this time, so I'm looking between the shelves for the person that came in and I see a middle-aged, baldy man looking around. He seemed normal at first but didn't really say anything when I asked him the next 2 times if he needed help. He pretty much ignored me, so I went about my business while keeping my eye on him. He was starting to make me nervous because he wasn't really looking at anything, just kind of making it look like he was looking at what was in front of him when his attention was focused elsewhere, seemingly at the ceiling. So I decided to give it one more try to let him know that I'm wondering what he's doing. Can I help you find anything? I asked as I walked past him to put a movie away. At this point, he'd been in the store nearly 20 minutes. He responded in such a way that made it clear that there was something off in his mind. Facing me but with his eyes averted from my face, he says in a startlingly loud drawling voice, "Oh, you know, just browsing." So I politely said, "Okay, just let me know if I can help you with anything," and went about my duties. He left shortly after this, at which point I let out a sigh of relief. A few days went by and I was opening by myself again. I went to start shelving the movies when the door dinged, and I again turned to greet whoever it was when I saw the same guy be lining it straight at me. I kinda panicked a little but stood my ground, and when he got right up to me, seriously so close I leaned back away from him. He lifted an open can of nuts and offered cashew. "Oh no, thank you," I said. I asked if I could help him find anything and he didn't answer, and he went to the start of the wall where the movies that started with it were located, which was just a few feet to the left of where I was putting up the B or C movies. He was very obviously pretending to look at movie boxes by picking them up and flipping them over and then putting them back. He continued this and shuffled along behind me as I moved down the wall. After a few minutes of this, I got uncomfortable and took the cart to the front counter, at which point he left the store. A few customers came and went, and I went back to shelving the movies. When I was around the M area of the movie wall, cashew guy came back and continued his pretend perusal of the movie boxes, always just a few feet to left of me. So in the next area of the store, there were shelves that went a bit higher than the rest, and on the very top shelf, there were softcore movies. There was also a back room that contained the hard stuff, but I only went in that room one time right before I quit just to see what it was like. Anyway, I was shelving the movies with cashew guy near me, not saying anything to me until I get to softcore section. He reached for one of the boxes at the top, which made me shudder, and says to me in his loud, strange voice, "I bet you have one of those big football player boyfriends." Thoroughly creeped out and disgusted, I go straight to the front counter and another male customer walks in. This guy finds what he's looking for and goes to the register. I whispered to this guy that there was a man bothering me and I asked if he would stay until the guy leaves. He shrugged and just kinda stood by the door awkwardly until cashew guy walked out. I thanked the guy and he left. I went back to the shelves, and not 5 minutes later, cashew guy came back and again tried to engage me in an awkward conversation. I went to the front counter and called my mom. She and my sister were out getting lunch, so I told her what was going on and they brought me something to eat. As soon as I picked up the phone, he left the store. He didn't come back that day. Next door to the movie place was an electronics store that was run by a very nice and talkative man. I never spoke to his wife, but I knew English wasn't her first language. He would come over and use our shrink wrap machine and talk and make us laugh. One evening after my encounter with the strange man, the nice guy from the store came in more serious than normal and warned us about a man that had come in while his wife was working alone and he was out getting food. The man was walking around picking things up and putting them back down in such a way that made him uncomfortable. I knew who it was right away. After a while, the nice guy from the store's wife asked if he was going to purchase something, and he picked up a random house phone and asked how much it was. She told him and he got upset at the price. He took it to the counter anyway, and when she rang him up, he tried to pay with a crumpled up check from his pocket. She refused to accept the check and he got angry, so she called her husband to come back and handle the situation. Her husband told the man that the check was suspicious and they normally wouldn't accept it as payment. He understood that there was something off with this guy and agreed to accept the check on a condition that the man give a phone number where he could be reached. He told him that if the check bounced, he was going to call him and the man would have to cover the cost of it all. The man agreed, but he knew it was a bad deal all the way around. He said that after the man left the store, he went and stood in the parking lot and just stared up at the sky for about 10 minutes. I figured by his description that it was the same man who had been bothering me. One day not long after the above, I go to the movie store to pick up my paycheck and the girl working tells me some man came in asking about me. She said he seemed off, and she said she knew he was talking about me when he referenced my curly hair. He gave me the creeps, but I personally never saw the guy again. I found out why when a few days later the guy who owned the other store came in saying that, unsurprisingly, the check the man had paid with bounced. He called the number the man gave him a few times and talked to the man on the phone. Each time getting nowhere in the conversation, he did a pretty good impersonation of the startlingly loud drawling voice. "Oh yeah, okay." Anyway, he called one more time and a woman answered. When he explained the situation, the woman said, "I'm his mother, he's not here anymore, I had him committed, and the hospital picked him up this morning." The town I lived in could not even be called that. It was a settlement of perhaps 24 acreages clustered together near a lake, and boasted just an elementary school with grades kindergarten through grade 5, and no stores. On this particular day, I was at that school playground alone, swinging and pondering life. None of my friends were around, but the solitude never bothered me. I was perfectly content, swinging and daydreaming as I often did. That is when I noticed the van behind me. It was your classic creepy van. Older, large and boxy, white generic van. And what struck me as odd was how slow the van was driving. It could not have been driving faster than 10 miles per hour. Still swinging, I craned my neck and watched this van slowly creep along and then out of my line of vision. I thought that was the end of it when, a few minutes later, along comes the van again, ever slow, and this time, driving on the road in front of the park. The best way to vision where I was is that of a square. Road wraps completely around the playground, which is situated on a slight hill. I watched the van creep along, turn left and out of sight, and back behind me it came creeping along, ever slow and present. As I watched it disappear for the second time, I recalled an incident that took place just 2 months prior. In the nearby town where I was attending school, a few kids in the grade below mine had been approached by a man as they walked home from school, who offered them candy. He had allegedly been driving a white van. School officials had urged us to stay very vigilant. I began to run across the field, determined to beat the van to that road. Don't panic, I told myself. It's probably not the same guy. And that is when the idea hit me. Oh, the idiotic, dangerously foolish idea hit me. I was going to hide myself in a nearby bush, and as the van crept by, I would obtain its license plate and give it to the police. It would be to Ozzy, 12-year-old self. What were you thinking? I was thinking, because I did just that. I hid in the bushes, and I waited, and waited. I waited to no avail, and as I waited, the logical part of my brain kicked in. This was an extremely lonely, well-concealed spot of land. Maybe, just maybe, trying to obtain this license plate was not a smart idea. I suddenly wanted very much not to be in that isolated bush. Abandoning my attempts at being Nancy Drew, I began the journey home with a sense of urgency. As I walked along the road, a dirt pavement, I took in my surroundings and saw no van. Perhaps it had left the area. I thought hopefully. I turned right, away from the school and playground, and began to walk towards my house. Safety lay just beyond the hairpin turn of a road that I was jaunting along. A loud screeching of tires came into my ear canal. I turned slightly and saw it, the white van. Where it came from, I did not know. What I did know was that I was extremely isolated and that it was speeding towards me. That is when the lizard brain took over. I no longer thought. I read. I was no longer a whole being. My sole purpose was to run. I can still feel my sweaty feet sliding around in my sandals, still see my pink skirt frantically trying to keep up with my, still hear those squealing tires. I flung myself down the hill. At the foot of it lay my house, my lifeline. Out of the corner of my eye I saw the van for the last time. It was haphazardly turning left and away from me. The next thing I knew, I was standing at the family deep freeze, a red freezy in my hand. Vaguely I heard a faint voice, miles away. I was breathing heavily, hyperventilating really. What happened? What happened? My dad's face was white as a ghost. A hardened man. He looked truly afraid. I spat out the story and burst into tears. My dad hugged me. You're safe, he assured me. Then he left, determined to find this van. As he was gone, I run throughout the house, locking the doors when Dad returned. He told me he had seen no van. It had disappeared into the afternoon sun. Dad phoned the police anyway, and he stressed the similarities between what happened to me to the reports of what happened to my schoolmates. Unfortunately, the police never came to talk me. I don't think they really cared. I stayed in the house for the next few days, afraid to venture out. As the days wore on, I regained my confidence to return to the park, and life went on. I never did see that van again. I still shudder to think about what may have happened all those years ago if I had let that van catch up to me. The people in this story are me, a family of 4 consisting of a mother, father, toddler, and baby. And, of course, our guest of honor, the creep. For context, I am a 17-year-old female. I was born and raised in Canada with a pretty sheltered life as my mother is very overprotective. But up until this point, I have never dealt with harassment before. For the summer I am visiting my godmother in Italy. This is my first time leaving Canada. Since she works during the weekdays, I travel about on my own around Italy. For this story, I took a ferry to Ischia, a small island in Napoli, to tour around. When I first arrived on the island, I made the plan to head to a small scenic park not too far from the port so I could plan my day. It was around 3 in the afternoon when I was at the park. Now the park itself made its way into a semi-forested area. The pathways were covered by trees and bushes alike, so it's easy to get lost in there, at least for me. It was also pretty desolate at the time and gone from the public eye. I was sitting on the bench next to a playground for children, decked out with swings and slides. There was a family a little away from me playing at the playground. The playground resides in a little circle-like clearing in the park. On opposite sides of the clearing are the pathways that take you around the park. The paths have trees making a tunnel-like stair-like path, so it could be hard to see down it unless you are directly in front of it. From where I was sitting on the bench, which was near the north pathway, I could directly see down the south pathway. Now I was sitting at this bench for a while, mind you, as Italy is pretty hot and I'm not used to the heat. My head was down looking at my phone, so I wasn't exactly paying attention to the outside world, but I would look up periodically to watch the family play. It was around now 4 in the afternoon, which was nearing when I had to leave to catch my ferry back. As I was about to pack up, I look up from my phone and see a guy standing in the path across from me, the south pathway. Now I wear glasses. My eyesight isn't that good, so I couldn't really make out what this guy was standing there for at first glance. I also didn't want it to be known that I had my eyes on him, so I would try to get a better look from my peripherals. After a minute of watching this guy and trying to figure out why he was staring at me, I come to a horrifying conclusion. To put it lightly, this guy was jacking off in public while watching me. It was light out and a literal family was not even 10 feet away from me. This was the first time I've ever experienced anything like this, so I was scared. Let me make myself clear, I look like a teenager. I have acne and a baby face, so it is very clear I am underage. As I was sitting there panicking about what to do, I see this guy move side to side on the path to get a better look at me. The creep looked unassuming, with some gray basketball shorts, a black graphic shirt, and a balding head. From what I could tell, he was around his early 30s. I don't speak much Italian, and with how frazzled I was from this all, I could not utter a cohesive sentence. After sitting on the bench for another minute trying to calm down and think clearly, I pull out my translator app and type in a message to translate to Italian. Now, to not alert this creep that I knew what he was doing, I stood up casually and began to make my way to the mother of the family, who was with her young baby at the time. The father and the toddler, I believe, were gone playing off a little farther in the trees as I could not see them. While shaking with nerves, I approached the mother and hold up my phone with the message on it without a word. Now, from where the mother was, you could not see down the path, so she was none the wiser about what was happening. Roughly, my translated message went along the line of, "Hello, sorry I do not speak much Italian, but I am in need of help. There is a creepy guy on the path over there watching me and I am scared." Now I know I probably should have made my situation more clear in the message, but I was freaking out and I didn't know how well my English would translate into Italian, so I kept it short. After the mother read the message, she got a concerned look on her face and asked me to show her where this guy was. Now we walked like 5 feet over to where the path begins to find the guy and he's gone. I assume he saw me walking towards the mother. Thankfully, I came to find out the mother speaks a little English, so I was able to communicate roughly what the creep was doing. Since she was with a baby, I didn't want her to go after the creep, but she was mad enough to attempt. Eventually, she told me her husband would be back soon and he spoke more fluently. Once he came back, I re-explained what happened and asked if I could follow them out of the park to a public area so I would not be left alone and vulnerable. While they were packing up their belongings, I called my godmother and gave her a brief rundown of the situation and that I'll be making my way back to the ferry. Now I would love to say this is where my tale ends without any more troubles, but sadly that was not how it went. After me and the family left the playground area, we made our way to the opposite path from where the creep was to where I assumed was the exit to the park into the main road. While walking, the mother tried to comfort me, assuring the guy wouldn't follow me as he left as soon as he got a clue that I caught on. I thought differently as I could see this guy very clearly from where I was sitting and was not subtle about his staring. After walking a bit more throughout the path to the exit, I spot a familiar looking man walking back to the playground. Once I made eye contact with him, I immediately knew it was the creep from before, walking casually like nothing was wrong. Once he spotted me walking with the family, he quickly made a turn onto a path that diverged from the main one. This creep was circling back to find me, assuming that I stayed at the playground or was walking alone to the exit. I leaned over to the mother and quickly tell her that it was the same guy. Unfortunately, the path that the guy took to avoid us was the same one we needed to take to get to the exit. This dumb creep cornered himself without any way to leave except to pass by us. The father at that point had the baby in his arms and the toddler following closely behind him. The mother in a rage followed shortly after, the creep cussing him out in a mix of English, Italian, and Spanish. This creep walked sheepishly off with his head tucked, pretending he could not hear the lady yelling at him. Finally, after the angry mother stopped following the man, we made it to the exit of the park. I thanked them profusely and bid my farewells and made my way down to the port. That family saved me from a dangerous situation and I could not be more thankful for their comfort and protection. I often think about what could have happened had I left the park on my own, knowing this guy would have circled back for me. So for my first harassment experience, I give the rating -1 out of 5 stars, would not recommend. So to the creepy guy in the park, let's not meet ever again. At the time of this happening, a 23-year-old female, was 19 and homeless in a big city. I just recently moved to that city and was on my way back to the shelter from the public library. I was taking a shortcut through an alley wide enough for a car to go through, and I noticed an old beat up looking car come into the alley and driving slowly behind me. I figured they probably just didn't feel like they had enough room to pass me, so I picked up the pace and crossed the street. They drove to the same side of the street that I was on and kept pace with me. There was just one guy in the vehicle, looked to be in his mid-20s and Hispanic. He rolled down his window and said, "Hey, are you okay? How old are you?" I looked like I was about 14, and I'm pretty short, so I got that question a lot. I just responded, "I'm fine, and I'm not a minor if that's what you're asking." He asked me if I needed a ride, and I politely declined. Then he starts telling me he's just really concerned and wanted to talk, really insistently and smiling through almost this entire interaction. I asked him why we couldn't just talk on the street where we were, and he dodges the question and again asks me if I'm sure that I don't want to ride. My gut was telling me he had bad intentions, and if I were as young as I looked, I might have fallen for it. Instead, I looked around me to make sure I wasn't going to get ambushed and walked up to his passenger window. I told him in the most threatening voice I could muster, "I know you don't really want to talk. I'm sure you have worse things in mind, and I've memorized your license plates and I'm going straight to the police station. I better not ever see you again." I never saw him again. Unfortunately though, I forgot to write down his plates and the shelter curfew was going into effect soon and I didn't have time to file a report at the station. It didn't occur to me to call the non-emergency number. I also purchased as large of a knife as I legally could for self-defense. Alright, but that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and comment something down below. But as always,
Have a nice day.